cultivation to feed an ever-growing population eventually devastated the landscape. We know now that civilization inevitably destroys the environment, but they discovered it here for the first time. The question was the same for them as it is for us today: how to balance the fertility of the earth against the voracious demands of the city. The watchman at Uruk, Muha Abu Gumar, lives out here with his family. He belongs to one of the Montefic tribes who inhabit this part of the desert. His forefathers fought the Turks, the British, indeed anyone who tried to impose their rule on the south from the outside.
Now what is this then? White temple. Yeah. And this is Sumerian? From Sumer, yeah.
He knows the site like the back of his hand, down to the deep levels. These massive foundations of old Sumer. A stone-built storeroom from 3000 BC for temple food and beer. Alcohol is a Mesopotamian word.
God, this is amazing, isn't it? Really? So, after Parthi and...
With the ups and downs of any living organism, the city lasted through to about 300 AD. But by the Arab conquest it was dead, after a life of over 5,000 years. It's a salutary experience walking these weathered gullies, littered with testimony to the long ascent of man, if such it is. Here were enormous temples and palaces as big as cathedrals, their facades decorated with blue glazed tiles, just as you'll see today on the mosques of Iraq.
This is from the Irigal Palace. So this is from the front of the wall of the palace. Oh my God. And from the Seleucid times. So this is when the palace was rebuilt after the time of Alexander the Great.
2000.
More than 2,000 years old, isn't that astonishing? Thank you very much.
هذا عصر العبيد تاريخه 6000 سنة قبل الميلاد.
So this is Obeid. Obeid. So 6,000 years.
6,000.
And this. But what is this here? What is this, Mr. Muha?
عملة بارتية.
It's money. It's a coin.
Money, فلوس.
Of the Parthians.
بارتية.
So this is from Uruk in the time of the Roman Empire. Yeah. And this, I think I recognize.
And from the deep past, hints of the enigmatic beginnings we saw at Eridu. Sumerian pottery, wheel-turned pottery, for the wheel is found here for the first time in history, along with so many other great inventions we still live our lives by today. Here was the first astronomy, the first literature, the first school, the first map of the world. Here they first thought of dividing time and space in multiples of 60, so that even now, whenever we look at a watch, we're still in their debt. Inside Muha's guest hut, within the old walls, we're the only inhabitants of Ishtar's city tonight.
It's wonderful to be here. And all these are your children, your little children. Hello.
Even so, Muha still observes the gracious formalities of desert hospitality.
Thank you so much for showing me around Warka. It's this wonderful sight.
Iraqis have always been great storytellers, going back through the 1001 Nights to the world's first literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh built the walls. Yeah.
Gilgamesh built the walls. King of Uruk, first and best of heroes. His was the original tale of the flood and the great ark, known today to almost every child across the world. His last adventure was the futile quest for everlasting life, model for all searches from the Odyssey to the Holy Grail, Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And we know his story because of writing. Writing is first found in the world here in Uruk, maybe invented in this city by some unknown genius not long before 3000 BC. Without writing, there could be no civilization. And it was through writing that we humans found a kind of immortality, passing on our memory to posterity, so that even now we can go back with them, as they would say, to a far-off day, on a far-off night, in a far-off time, in Uruk, as the scribe writes, Gilgamesh, what you seek you will never find. For when the gods created man, they let death be his lot, eternal life they withheld. Let your every day be full of joy, love the child that holds your hand, let your wife delight in your embrace, for these alone are the concerns of humanity. Erbil, the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. It's one of several mud-brick towns in the north of Iraq, which have survived from the age of the first cities right up to our own time. Its great gate has been entered by conquerors from Alexander the Great and Tamburlaine to guerrilla armies in the recent wars in Kurdistan. Its mud-brick walls and houses, fallen and rebuilt so many times over the years, that the city now rests on a mound 100 feet deep in debris. Here, at the end of the 2nd millennium AD, is the very image of the first urban life on Earth. Massive burned brick walls towering over the plain. If you could have flown over the densely packed workers' quarters of Uruk, Nippur, or Ur of the Chaldees, this is what you would have seen. And within the walls of Erbil, we can still get an idea of how people lived and how society was organized in those first cities of old Sumer. For here the past literally is still alive. Inside the old citadel at Erbil, you find yourself in a maze of narrow lanes and alleyways fanning out from the main gate. And although the mud brick houses on either side have been rebuilt and destroyed countless times over the generations, the pattern of the streets is still essentially the same. There are 800 families here today, that's 4,000 people, organized into neighborhood wards just as they were in Ur and Nippur. So these were small-scale, face-to-face communities which knew each other or were related by kinship or marriage or from the old village, perhaps with a local shrine and a tiny little market, rather like later Islamic cities where each ward had its mosque, its souk and its bath. In ancient times, the soul of the Mesopotamian town was the temple. Towering over the mud-brick streets, a visible assurance to the townspeople that God was among them. It's still like that today. The Al-Mullah family has run the mosque here in Erbil for 600 years. In just the same fashion in ancient cities like Uruk or Nippur, single families can be traced over many generations running the main temples. In this little corner of Iraq, the gods have come and gone. Ishtar, Zoroaster, Yahweh, Jesus, and now Allah. But the ritual of worship itself has remained. And on this spot where the oracle of the goddess Ishtar once stood, there's been continuous worship for longer than anywhere else in the world. In such continuity, perhaps, lies one of the defining qualities of civilization. Civilization was a great achievement, and the Sumerians were justly proud of it. They loved city life and the luxuries it afforded. But at heart they were a pessimistic people who knew how fragile human achievement could be. On the famous standard from the golden age of the city of Ur, images of war and peace are mysteriously juxtaposed. One of the great Sumerian myths tells how the goddess Inanna brought the arts of civilization from the god of wisdom, Enki of Eridu, like Pandora's box. Here were the delights of society, exquisite craftsmanship, beautiful clothes, the arts of sex and music. But civilization has a darker side, said Enki, which has to be accepted along with the good. There was the art of being mighty, the art of being kind, the art of straightforwardness, the art of deceit, the art of kingship, justice, and the enduring crown. The resounding note of a musical instrument, rejoicing of the heart, the kindling of strife, the plundering of cities, the setting up of lamentation, fear, pity, terror. All this is civilization, said the God of wisdom. All this I give you, and you must take it all with no argument, and once taken, you cannot give it back. In around 2000 BC, signs of foreboding swept Sumer. Too much agricultural land had been ruined, inflation set in, famine, economic collapse. Evil, wrote the king Ibisin, is descending on our land. Then all the cities of Sumer were smashed by a coalition of ancient enemies from Iran and the desert. Is destroyed. Bitter is its lament. The country's blood now fills its holes like hot bronze in a mold. Bodies dissolve like fat in the sun. Our temple is destroyed. The gods have abandoned us like migrating birds. Smoke lies on our city like a shroud. Their lament has echoed down the ages, to be heard again at Troy, at Dresden, at Hiroshima. And how loaded with meaning it is for we of the late 20th century. For now we too have seen the columns of smoke hanging over Mesopotamia like a shroud. The people of Sumer would sing laments for their sacked cities for 2,000 years. Meanwhile, refugees fled Iraq on the caravan routes across the western desert, images evoking those of our own time. City dwellers become as one with nomads who'd never known a city. Among them, the Bible says, was a citizen of Ur, now revered by half the world, Abraham. Witnesses to the ruin of civilization, faced by the unyielding harshness of nature. Cast out of Eden, for such people perhaps the old gods had failed. For Abraham, son of an idol maker in the old city of Ur, the disaster sowed the seeds of an idea which would change the world. An idea of stark simplicity, a single God, God the Father. Abraham took his idea with him as he migrated to Palestine. And now, ironically, he's viewed as the founding father by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. For Abraham was the first man to make a covenant with God. It was perhaps Iraq's greatest legacy to the world.